One of the most common questions that I get asked is, how do I know if I should work out or take a rest day? Sometimes we feel a little meh when it comes to our energy, or we feel a little unmotivated to train. A lot of women experience what I call training ambivalence, which is this uncertainty around the decisions that they need to make in order to help them to get where they want to go. So a lot of women really struggle with deciding whether or not to work out. So I'm going to share 2 checklists with you that will help you powerfully decide whether it's a good idea to work out or not. So the before training checklist has 4 key questions. Question number 1, did I sleep 7 to 8 hours last night? Now, for those warriors who have small humans or children with medical conditions who may have broken sleep and may only average 6 or so hours, you'll use that as your standard or criteria for your checklist. For those of us who average around 7 to 8 hours, or that is our ideal amount of sleep, I want you to use that as your standard for your checklist. If you got your ideal amount of sleep, we can give that a check mark and a green light. The second question is, did I eat enough food? We always want to look at the day before. That hugely impacts our energy for the next day. And this is where tracking can be really helpful because we can clearly see if we ate enough food. Do we get enough calories in? Do we eat enough protein? Did we balance our meals? If we ate enough food, we can give ourselves a check mark. We've got a green light. Question 3, am I hydrated? Did I drink enough liquids yesterday? Did I drink water? If we can answer yes, we can give ourselves a tick and we get a green light. The 4th question is this a priority for today? Yesterday, I was meant to record this podcast episode. It was Wednesday, it was podcast day, but I ran out of energy by 10 a.m. I trained really hard yesterday morning, and as I settled in to record this podcast episode, I realized that I was in big trouble. I actually hadn't prioritized the most important task for the day, which was doing my podcast. We need to get really good at understanding what is the priority, what is the highest demand on my energy for the day. So I previously made some promises to myself for Wednesdays, and that was to not train super hard before I record my podcasts and to also not train super hard before I went to acupuncture. Yesterday, I trained super hard in the morning. I tried to record the podcast and I went to acupuncture. And that treatment was very intense because my nervous system was already really fried from my training session. So I had a lower threshold and a lower tolerance to my treatment. And while I was lying there, panic sweating, needles in me, I thought about this idea or concept that comes from the dog behavioralist world, and that is trigger stacking. So in animal behavior, they talk about how when a dog experiences stresses and they stack on top of each other, they can then reach their threshold. And when they reach their threshold, they can have a reaction. So lying there on the acupuncturist table, having not recorded my podcasts, having trained too hard and being way too low on energy, I thought about it from an energy perspective, how that we can experience stresses in our lives, but if we have too many, we reach a threshold. And then if we go over that threshold, there's a reaction. And that reaction is low energy, poor sleep, not being able to recover well, moodiness, irritability. And so we need to learn how to keep ourselves under threshold so we can achieve what we want to achieve. So yesterday was my podcast day. That should have been my priority. It is a high demand on my energy, but I broke my promise. I trained really hard. So when I moved into my next task, I didn't actually have enough energy to give to that task. So that fourth question is training your priority today? Training should be a priority. For all of us, it should be a priority at least 3 times a week. And what that means is that we then need to look at our day and what else are we stacking into that day that doesn't demand as much energy from us as our training. I believe that the highest demand on our energy should always be put in the morning time. Then we stack other things after that. But we want to keep ourselves below thresholds because we don't want to have a reaction. We don't want to be low on energy or tired or irritable or lose patience or for it to affect our recovery or our sleep. The other way that we could look at it is we need to increase our threshold. For a lot of women that when they start inside of Warrior School, their threshold is quite low. For example, I was talking to Kelsey the other day. She's been with me for about 19 or 20 months. And when we first started our work together, Kelsey could only tolerate 10 minutes of walking at a time, 2 sessions a week for 20 to 30 minutes, only doing bodyweight strength training. Fast forward 20 months later, she's training 4 times a week. She's lifting heavy weights. She can walk for an hour. She has a higher threshold. And what that means is that we can stack more things in her day or in her week before she reaches that threshold. So we can also work on building that threshold up. But we still need to be mindful of what's the priority for today. So did you sleep enough? Did you eat enough? Did you drink enough? And is it the priority for the day? And so that just gives us permission to know that the physiology is strong enough to train. Then we can use a checklist after our training. And that checklist has 3 questions. The first question, how was my energy for the rest of the day? So for example, yesterday, I knew I was in trouble because I ran out of energy at 10 a.m. We always want to look at, did the demands that I placed on my body allow me to still have stable, consistent energy over the day? Also, what plays into that is, did we sleep enough? Did we eat enough the day before? Or are we eating enough that day to recover from the demand? So remember, we always want to look at, well, how can I push my threshold a little higher? The second question is, how did I sleep that night? So this will be a sign of our recovery. If we had trouble getting to sleep, we had broken, restless sleep, or not enough sleep, potentially that's a sign that we either didn't give the body enough fuel or the demands placed on it were too hard. Then the third question is, how do I feel the next day? Do I feel like I recovered? Okay, warrior, if you are feeling unsure whether or not you should train today or not, use that checklist to help you powerfully decide whether or not to show up to the practice.